Hello friends, and welcome to my process video for Inktober Day 3. Today's theme for Inktober is bait, and of course I'm adding rabbits to it again. I'm taking some inspiration from the previous day where I had a snake in the grass by the rabbits, and since one of my rabbits' favorite treats is apples, I have a snake hanging out in some apple tree leaves with the apple hanging nearby, and the rabbits looking around trying to figure out, hey, is it safe? We want to grab that apple. I also wanted the contrast of something cute but also alarming, something a bit unnerving, so you have a bit of that tension. I started with thumbnails in my sketchbook, then I went to a full-size layout you see here in red pencil. I also collected a variety of references and have them set up on a Pinterest board to use to refine the shapes when I go back in darker pencil here before I go to actual drawing paper. For inking this, I wanted the same brush effect as the Pentel brush pen. I really love the flexibility it gave me in the previous pieces, but I also wanted some more control and maybe playing with a bit different ink. So I'm using a 0 round brush and this Heart of Darkness ink from Noodlers. I also put it in a smaller bottle so it's easier to use. Again, I'm using my handy LED light board and just working on those darker lines as guides to start inking in some of the main lines. I want to get off the light board as soon as possible so I can start to focus on the detail work. But getting these first lines right is essential, and no amount of detail work afterwards will fix problems that are made on this level. So when I'm inking, I'm not using the exact lines that you see underneath on the drawing. I'm breaking up a lot of them to suggest the shape and the texture, and using my underdrawing as a sort of skeleton to build off of. So my original drawing underneath is more of a guide for the shape and not necessarily literal. If you wanted to do it that way, that would be fine too. But I like how this method gives me a safe way to be spontaneous. Even still, I mess up a lot, but that's what practice is for. Mistakes are simply part of art. Inking in the leaves and branches, I'm trying to let my hand be a bit wiggly and loose, so I hopefully get more of an organic, irregular line than the smooth, more certain lines that I was using for the fur. I hope it gives a sense of a rougher texture and some more visual interest overall. With the main lines finished with the light table, it's time to start to work on the details. I go back into the fur because the fur is the best part. It's the most fun. When I get to paint something that feels soft and dynamic, it's just very satisfying. I wanted some more interest in that gap in the middle of the painting, so it's a perfect spot to add some whiskers. I hope that if they're placed right, it'll draw attention to the face while adding more interest to gaps that are in the back of the drawing. Filling out some of the lines on the face, I use short lines in sets to emphasize the volumes that form the face, but also using the line length and the flow of the lines to show the volume and texture. The cute wild hares that I kept finding as references have these adorable little black peaks to their ears, which I'm trying to block in here, and I'm breaking up the shape with little short fluffy lines. The first ear felt too regular in shape, so I brush in more with the second ear, trying again for more texture because it's hard to go back and add solid white for texture later. Adding fluff to the lines of the back of the head is really fun but really frustrating because it's a super soft area with lots of fur and volume, and I never seem to do it justice. Seriously though, it's super fluffy and soft. Highly recommend for petting if the rabbit lets you. One problem I'm running into is where to store these pieces. There's a huge mess on my desk as always, and I have closet storage, which is awesome, but it's also just chaos in there. Part of that is the giant stacks of unused paper I seem to always acquire. I've gotten better about that, but there's still a lot. But also because I have a lot of old works gathered, stored away to never be enjoyed until I go back to try to clean out some space and then rediscover them. Some of it is good, but some of it is really bad, and those might be destined for the trash bin. But some of them are decent things that I posted in the past and should have listed on Etsy, but never bothered because I'm really hard on myself. And it's kind of embarrassing to put things up when you don't feel like they're quite there yet. But I'm sorting through them and compacting the majority back into the obscurity of my closet. But for the good ones, I'm hoping maybe to find them a home. So I'm gonna post them for sale on my Etsy page if you happen to have space in your heart, in your home, and your wallet for a little bit of artwork. I'll be sharing that page with you once it's finished. Maybe this week even. That would be lovely. Then I can use that funding and renewed space to make more better things for you guys. At this point in the painting, I was tempted to go back in with a lighter ink water blend, but wanted to hold out with just straight ink as long as possible. So instead I'm just using a very light touch and as little ink as I can on my brush to fill out the gaps in the foreground texture with tiny light strokes. They are so light that looking back at the video it almost looks like I'm using a lighter ink, but it's the same bottle. I had to double check though. The thickness just makes a big difference. Again, I'm sticking with the flow of the objects like the fur here, instead of just blocking in any direction. The better you know the object in 3D, the easier this becomes to do without extra references. So I don't have a lot of practice drawing snakes or seeing snakes in 3D. I'm not as confident about those lines and rely a lot more on references to figure out what makes a snake look snake-like. The leaves I keep pretty simple, mostly just suggesting the major planes of their shapes and not a lot of detail. Part of that is practical. I don't want to spend a whole bunch of time perfecting them that I could be spending elsewhere. And part of it is the aesthetic. I don't want the leaves to steal focus from the rest of the image. And they could use improvement here, but I think the relative simplicity works and it looks pretty neat. With the line work done and then redone, I finally give in and decided to block in some ink for the background. Well, an ink wash. It was a tough choice because I wanted to stay true to the full ink only concept, but I decided I cared more about the final effect of the piece than sticking to that random rule. So in goes a wash of ink to add flat contrast to the background, and it helps the foreground pop. Looks pretty good. Glad I did it. Now I'm going back in with that Deleter brand white, adding some wispy highlights to a couple of places like those little whiskers, before I use an even lighter ink wash to add just a pop of subtle dimension into the illustration foreground. And that's it. Inktober Day 3 finished. I hope you enjoyed taking a closer look at my process for this piece, and I'll come back for my next one. We're already a week into the month and I started to cut some corners to keep up. How are you keeping up with Inktober? Is it working out or did you tend to fall a bit behind? It's pretty easy to do when life gets in the way. Let me know in the comments. Also, of course, if you have any ink or Inktober questions, let me know. Even if I don't know the answer, it'd be fun to help you find it. Thanks, friends, and see you next time.